All right, so good afternoon. Thank you everyone for joining the FSCJ Library and Learning Commons today for our panel discussion titled Getting on the Same Page, FSCJ Authors on Self-Publishing. My name is Sharon Uskokovich and I'm a librarian at FSCJ's Kent campus. I will be moderating this event with my colleagues Amber Strickland, who is a librarian at South Campus, and Susan Mythen, who is our Director of Campus Library Services and the WebEx host with the most today. She'll be monitoring the chat box for us, and we do appreciate that. If you arrived a little early, you saw our PowerPoint that highlighted FSCJ authors who published during the 2019-2020 academic year and our FSCJ Authors LibGuide. All of our panelists are linked to the LibGuide, and some of their works are available at various campuses to borrow. In the past, the library has hosted a reception at Colloquium and on Kent campus for our FSCJ authors. With the pandemic, that wasn't possible this year, but it has given us an opportunity to host an event that celebrates our colleagues in a new way. You may have noticed that we have a lot of themes, or we like to have a lot of themes with our events and displays in the library. So our event today is honoring National Novel Writing Month, or NaNoWriMo for short. Let's take a quick poll to see how many of you know what NaNoWriMo means. Amber is going to help with that. I have to be honest, I had never heard of it before. We were creating this theme. So there's the poll. Have you heard about NaNoWriMo before? Hi, Thomas, you just joined us. Julie Pachter knows about it. All right, the polling has ended. Just waiting for the results to appear unless you see them, and I don't.
If you can't see the poll, 10 out of 12 said that yes, they have heard about the event, and 4 out of 12 said no. 1 out of 12 did not answer.
Okay. Well, that was more than I thought. So Julie is correct. NaNoWriMo is an annual creative writing project that takes place during the month of November. Participants attempt to write a 50,000-word manuscript between November 1st and November 30th. And since 2006, nearly 400 novels have been published through traditional publishing houses, and over 200 novels have been published by smaller presses or self-published. Some notable titles that came from NaNoWriMo include Water for Elephants by Sarah Gruen and Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. Let's take another quick poll to see how many of you are currently writing. If not, maybe NaNoWriMo is a project for you. It's so great to see so many people actually showing their faces today for the panel discussion. Thank you for doing that. NaNoWriMo actually has some pretty funny hashtags. One of them is Stay Home Rimo. It's great for the pandemic. I see Mark like that one. So the results say that, oh, it's almost split. 8 people said yes, 6 people said no, and 1 person didn't answer. All right. Moving right along. Our esteemed panelists have written in a variety of genres, and they have all self-published. Today, they will share their experiences for those of us who might be interested in pursuing that same path. Let me up to my introductions. So I'll start with introducing Ms. Elisabeth Ball. She is a librarian at FSCJ who has self-published 2 novels titled Look For It and Find It, and is at work on a 3rd titled Keep It Safe, all in the genre of faith fiction. In her job at FSCJ, she teaches information literacy and is continually learning about open educational resources. Ms. Ball appreciates the current wave of open access fiction. Both of her books, as well as her other musings, are freely available to read at elisabethball.com.
Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is Amber Strickland, and I'm going to Gilmore. Dr. Gilmore teaches literature writing here at FSCJ, where he was awarded a 2018 Distinguished Faculty Award. Tim writes about the haunted South and historic places and people in the Jacksonville area. He has published 20 books, most recently Murder Capital, 8 stories, 1890s to 1980s. Tim also created jackpsychogeo.com, a literary mapping project that artistically explores the psychology of place in more than 500 stories of locations around Jacksonville. Tim's writing has appeared in numerous national and Florida publications, and 2 of his books were adapted and performed by FSCJ's Drama Works. Tim has also presented at numerous events and venues, including the Jacksonville Historical Society and the Jacks by Jacks Literary Art Festival, of which he was founder. In February 2019, he was a keynote speaker at the University of Florida's English Graduate Organization. And I'm also going to introduce Ms. Darlyn Kuhn. Ms. Darlyn Kuhn is that rare animal, a Florida native. Born and reared in Jacksonville, she obtained an AA from FSCJ when it was Florida Junior College, a BA from Rollins College, and an MFA from Spalding University. She was the 19th writer-in-resident at the Jack Kerouac Project House in Orlando. Her poetry collections are Red Wax Rose, published by Shady Lane Press, and 3 Houses, published by Scribbles. Her debut novel, Sewing Holes, was published by Twisted Road Publications in 2015 and won that year's Royal Palm Award from the Florida Writers Association. Since moving back to Jacksonville in 2017, Darlyn and her husband, Brad Kuhn, have developed the Southeast Sister Cities Reading Tour, the River of Grass Writing Experience, and are current organizers of the Jacks by Jacks Literary Arts Festival. She works as an administrative assistant in the communications department at FSCJ and teaches advanced writing for the media at UNF. She is a published poet, novelist, short story writer, and journalist.
I want to make sure I unmute myself. All right, Marq Mervin is a multifaceted creative, educator, and author of One Day I Hoped That, a collection of prose and poetry. Professor Mirvan teaches art, design, and digital media at FSCJ. Marq is also an advocate of art and design education for marginalized and underrepresented communities. Some of his work includes speaking about equitable representation at TEDx FSCJ, and formerly leading the Education Committee for AIGA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. During his downtime, Marq is either gaming or performing poetry at open mic nights. Welcome, all of you. And their websites for their various projects are in our chat box for you to explore. I'm going to bring up the questions. But before we jump into the questions, let's take one more poll to see how many of you in the audience have self-published. And while Amber is taking that poll, I would like to let the audience know that we will monitor the chat box for the panelists, but we will hold on to those questions until the end of the discussion. Drum roll. I feel like that silence, like I need to fill the void. Okay, the poll is ended. We're awaiting the results. And most of us, 10 of us, have said no. We have not self-published. So this will be a great learning experience for most of us. With that said, I will open with the first question. And I'm going to start the first question with Elisabeth. But there's no particular order for the panelists if you want to jump in. But for the first question, how would you explain the difference between self-publishing, indie publishing, and traditional publishing for our audience?
Okay. Well, I'm on a learning curve with this. I used to think that indie and self-publishing were the same, but I've done a little reading and I've kind of come to understand that self-publishing and indie publishing are a little bit different now in definitions. Self-publishing it's when it's all on the author to do all the work and the cost, and they keep the copyright. And indie publishing is also, I believe, and other panelists can correct me, called hybrid publishing, where the publisher assumes some cost and the author does. And I know with self-publishing, you keep your copyright. I'm not sure what happens with indie publishing, so someone else can speak to that. And then traditional publishing is old school. The author does not pay anything. The publishing company sort of pays for everything and does the whole process, and the author does not own the copyright. So that's my current understanding. And I know the word indie is very popular now, applied to a lot of different things, and I might have that definition incorrect, but that is my understanding.
Thank you. If one of the other panelists would like to answer.
Yeah, that's how I interpreted it, because much like Elisabeth, I'm still learning stuff, and it was a learning curve where there's so much you have to read, and so much where I think as writers, you want to get to the writing as opposed to the reading of well, how do you publish this? How do you send this off? When is who is the right person to contact? So I definitely agree with Elisabeth's definitions, and it also makes me think, I'm like, was I fully self-publishing or was it more indie? And I think because I don't think indie publishing it may be a new term, but it's definitely a new term to me, where I'm still figuring out what that means exactly. And then it also expands a little bit where you can have more accessible publishers that can lead you into like global distribution, but then you don't have to pay as much. You pay a certain amount, and then they'll cover a lot of the other expenses like printing and distribution and sending it to different stores and all this good stuff. So there's surprisingly a good amount of layers to this process, which I knew it would be hefty, but it felt like I assigned myself homework, and now I better feel when my students go through. I'm like, ooh, I don't think I want to do homework anymore. It's an interesting process, but it's been okay so far. We're still learning.
Right. It's rather tedious to me to learn about. Yes. Like you said, that's not my favorite part of it at all. It's kind of tedious, but
that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. If anybody's interested, don't take that as, don't do it.
Right. No, if you're in it, you should do it. But it's not something that's like you said, Marq, there are a lot of layers you're peeling through, trying to figure it out. Yeah.
I think this is Tim Gilmore. I think Elisabeth and Marq made some good delineations there, with how the words are defined. I think a lot of times they can be used interchangeably, or at least people use them interchangeably, whether that is correct according to whomever or not. And it's true that indie has a certain connotation to it. And self-publishing has a certain connotation to it. You know, self-publishing back in the day before the internet, I mean, was basically vanity publishing. So I think to people who have an older mindset, a lot of times it can still have that connotation. And so indie definitely sounds better. But you know, the lines blur in a lot of places too, because even small imprints a lot of times don't do their own you know, printing. They might just have an imprint but use you know, Amazon's Create Space or something like that. So technically, you know, that looks a lot like self-publishing, but on the other hand, it's you know, it's not really a small press because they don't print. It's a small imprint. So you know, the boundaries and the ways that I think these terms are used a lot of times can kind of overlap and blur.
I agree. This is Darlyn Kuhn, and I've been published traditionally as a ghostwriter by Penguin Press. That's one of the things where they tell you exactly what they want, you do it, and somebody sends you a check, and that's a lovely way to write. I like that. But my first book that came out with my name on the cover was when I was the Kerouac House writer in residence, and they had a tiny imprint, Tim, called Shady Lane Press, and they didn't have a printing press in the back room cranking out copies. They definitely used a printer from out of town who made the books, but I had a lot of influence on, say, the cover art and the look and feel of the book more than I would have with someone like Penguin, who makes all those decisions. The second book that I did was completely independent. It was a collection of poetry that I did with my husband. And we just went down for a long weekend in the Keys, compiled our poetry that we'd been sending back and forth for 3 years as a conversation. And we called it a novella in verse. And the reason we did that book was because we had been going to readings, like Mark was talking about, the open mics. They're so much fun, and we've been reading, and everyone was saying, where's the book? Where's the book? We'll buy the book. And we thought, they'll buy the book. So we went down and had a nice long weekend, put the book together. My husband's a wonderful photographer, and he played around with Photoshop and made a beautiful cover. And we self-published that book using, I believe it was back then, Thomson Shore was the printer for that. And it's fun to have just all complete total control of the product. That was a lot of fun. And we had a ready-made audience that was asking for it. So that was nice. And then the third book, this to me is the my true definition of an independent press, is a small press out of Tallahassee, Florida called Twisted Road Publications that I have no contact with other than I liked their books, and I knew someone who'd had a book published by them, and I said, hey, would you write a letter and sort of warm up the editor? She liked my book and she published it, and that's this one I have here, the Sewing Holes novel. That one I had input on some of the creative process, like the cover, more than I would have with a big independent press. So that was my experience.
Thank you, everyone, for sharing your experiences and insights. I appreciate hearing it all. And I like Tim's comment from Shady Lane to Twisted Road. I had to say that loud.
I hadn't noticed that before, Tim. Thank you.
I look forward to seeing what the next one is going to be called, Darlyn. Easy Street or something.
Yeah.
I would love to live on Easy Street. That would be great.
So I'm going to go ahead and lead in with question 2, and I'm going to let Tim go ahead and start off our answers for this one. So, what led to your decision to publish independently, either through self-published platforms or with independent presses?
Yeah, I'm so interested in hearing other people's answers to this, but my own. Let me try to think of how I should give the succinct version of it. I guess for one thing, I had some things published in some national publications, some poetry particularly, and I was this is right after, not long after I had finished the PhD at UF, and I was talking to some of the MFA people, creative writing MFA people down at UF, and about publishing and how they go about it. And David Levitt, who was a novelist and he was the head of the MFA program at the time, he actually put me in touch with several agencies that were, they're pretty exclusive. I remember that there was one that you went to their website and it just had the name and there was nothing to click on or anything. Like they just had the website just to have their name. And it was like, a wall saying, you're outside. And I contacted each of them and had some interesting responses from them. And, they were considerate and everything. And to be honest, I think my biggest reason for deciding to publish things myself, it was my own, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, maybe this is a fault, but it's my own impatience. Mark said earlier, we like to focus on the writing. We're writers, that's what we like to do or drawn to do for whatever reason. And I knew people. I had a colleague years ago who had published poetry for probably more than 20 years in prestigious journals all over the place, and he had a file cabinet of several drawers with all of his acceptances and rejections and everything else. And he was always saying, one day I'll get a book together. And I just felt like, gosh, I want to write and keep writing and focus on that. So I did, started my website in 2012, and I had already published a couple of collections of poetry on my own, but that kind of shifted the direction of my writing and things. I was shifted the direction that I was going in with some things, and that's what I've been doing since then. It is, I'm not. Maybe this is another question that comes later. If so, I can stop. But the difficulty of self-promotion and things being like that being on you is really, really hard. It's not in my nature. I've gotten a lot better at it than I used to be. But that's the extra responsibility. In addition to, I would say, the extra responsibility of making sure that your work is tight when you put it out there, because if somebody is reading you and they encounter 5 typos in the first however many pages, you're going to lose some credibility. And I think there's more on us if we're doing things ourselves. We have to take that extra responsibility. I think maybe I've ventured into a couple of other questions there, but
Tim, I think you're good. I think you were perfect, because that was a great segue. And you brought up the story of my life with impatience.
Mm-hmm.
Because when I want to do something, I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to do it. And it's hard for me to sit with something for so long and then wait for someone else to give me approval. So I'm really tenacious, and I'm like, well, why not do it? Let me just try it out. So through that, what really inspired me to self-publish was that I had a bunch of ideas, but I didn't want them to just sit and eventually come to fruition, or, you know, just kind of sit there and not really flourish or do anything. So I thought, well, why not make a book? And in my case, it was like multiple reasons, because one, in digital media, I have to teach this program called InDesign, which is a print-based program. And I've always been scared of InDesign. Like, that was my most feared program, because I'm like, oh, I'm not good at this stuff, you know. And through that, that was one reason. And then I got offered an opportunity to speak at AIGA Nebraska in Omaha in 2018. And when I saw it, and I was one of the keynote speakers, and the other two, I'm like, man, they've done some amazing work. You know, and of course, I think as creatives, we tend to run into that area of almost imposter syndrome, or questioning, you know, do we deserve to be in this space? Why did you pick me? Because I still think that. I'm like, why did they pick me? But the other designers are now my friends. But what I thought in those months leading up to it was, what type of work can I have to really validate why they're flying me out here? Because that was just like a really nice gesture. And I didn't want them to like, oh, we spent this money and he has nothing to talk about. So with this combination of learning InDesign, having all these ideas, and then this, I guess, unintentional deadline that I needed to get it done by, I said, okay, well, I've been talking about making a book. Why not just do it? And it was a fun process. It's still a fun process, but it really just came down to other factors that really catapulted me into that area. But it definitely had a healthy mix of impatience, because I'm like, if I don't get this idea out, then I feel, for me as a creative, I get stuck, and new ideas won't be able to form until I get this other one out of the way. Then I can start to pour my energies into other stuff. So that's my ramble.
That's I think we're all a little impatient. That's a good way of describing it. My route to self-publishing was, I actually did have an agent, which is, I'd always heard that you were supposed to have that. He could not sell the first book he was looking at Christian publishers, because it was a sort of a Christian faith-based novel. And the feedback from the editors was not very hopeful, in the sense that I don't think what I was writing was what they wanted. So at that point, I decided, well, my brother had self-published a book, and so I'm going to do it this way. And there's that impatience thing, but also the idea that I wanted to get readers. And that's one of my main soapboxes, is for self-publishing and indie publishing houses, hybrid publishing. It gets your work out there much more quickly so that people can read it. And I have a friend who has an MFA, and she has for years tried to get an agent, and she has and if those novels were in the library, I would recommend them in Reader's Advisory, but no one can read them. So anyway, that's my story. Darlyn, did you want to comment?
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, I have to look at this more. I've already talked about the one truly self-published book, was the book of poetry my husband and I did together. But we have a company, Brad Kuhn and Associates, that where he acts as a ghostwriter for people, and also he helps writers self-publish their books. And so I think the thing that we see over and over and over again is what you talked about, Elizabeth, where really, really, really good work is not getting out into the world, because people are still trying to go back and for their ego, or for whatever reason, they want to be traditionally published. And, you know, that's the dream. Of course, you want some big house in New York to take your book and make it a worldwide bestseller. But with these really fine books that are not getting published, it's a shame. It's a darn shame. And now that you can take so much of it into your own hands and put out beautiful books, and there are ways to market it. I mean, we market books for people all the time, and there are many avenues that you can take to get your book out into the world. So I think submitting it to a New York publishing house, waiting 6 months for them to read it, or to an agent so that they can then submit it to the New York house, it's just a waste of life. You know, you're sitting there and you're going to the mailbox every day and you're tortured. And then it comes back and they always say something like, oh, I loved this and this and this about your book, but, and it's everything that comes after the but, the reason they're not going to do it. And then they say, but please send us something else. You know, please give us another year or two of your life. And at some point, there used to be dozens and dozens and dozens of publishing houses. Do you know how many there are in the United States of America now? I believe last count that my husband did for a presentation that he often gives to writing groups was 8. And I may be remembering wrong. It may be 6. There are 6 big houses. And so everything that everybody is writing in the whole wide world, including, you know, Stephen King and John Grisham and all the people who they just automatically take because they're wonderful. All of those people are what your little book that no one's ever heard of is competing against. So if you want your book in the hands of readers, and that's where it deserves to be because you've done the work, you've had it edited, you've put beautiful art on the cover, you've done all those things. Then, you know, you can take it in your hand, or you can hire somebody to do it for you, you know, for a little bit of money. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for those insights. Y'all are a wealth of information. I'm learning so much just by listening. The next question is kind of a multi-layered one. And let's see. So Darlyn, if you wouldn't mind starting with this next question. What platforms have you used to self-publish? Tell us about the technology skills a person needs to self-publish on these platforms. And did you have these skills before, or did you learn them along the way?
You're going to just zip right on past me pretty easily because I don't have a lot of those skills. I married a man who publishes books, which is very helpful and nice. So I don't have to actually know how to go out onto Create Space and upload a book. I know how to write. I know how to proofread and get things edited. And that's just one of my strongest recommendations is, like I believe Tim was saying before, don't be so impatient that you don't turn out your very, very, very best product. But once you have that very best product, the way that we did it with our self-published book, 3 Houses, is that we went to Thomson Shore Publishing and we had, I believe, a first box of 500 copies or something like that sent to us. And, you know, the day that box comes in the mail is like the second best day of your life. It's just amazing. So whether you self-publish it or you have an independent publisher like Twisted Road or whatever, when that book comes in the mail, it's just better than Christmas. But I believe now you can just go out, you know, print on demand. You turn in a beautiful Word document, put it into Create Space on Amazon. They look it all over. If there's problems with it, they get in touch with you and they say, hey, you need to fix this on page so-and-so, and you go do that. But let the others who have more experience and know more what they're talking about, because, you know, not everybody marries the guy who does that for them. I recommend it.
Well, I'll jump in real quickly. So I did self-publish on Amazon because it's just, you know, ubiquitous. And it just required some basic word processing skills, and their Create Space is now called, let me look, Kindle Direct Publishing. It's the same thing. And so you pick a template, you put in your Word file, you look it over. There's an option to do an ebook as part of that. So that is pretty basic and pretty simple. I didn't have much problem with that. I also created, as Susan Myvan mentioned in the chat, ElisabethBall.com. So that's my website, and I put both books as open access novels in sort of blog formation, a blog format on that. And so for that website, I had to build the website using WordPress. So that was more involved and tricky. And it's built, but it still has, it's clunky. So I probably should have paid someone to do that, but I still go in there and tinker with it. So that requires a little more of a technology mindset. And for my next book, I'm writing a third one, excuse me, I may use Pressbooks for that. Pressbooks is another app that you can put in the text, and from that create an ebook very simply. FSCJ has a Pressbooks account. I don't know. I know for completing course ebooks, etc. So that is something to look into if you're able to use that. But Jacksonville Public Library is a wonderful supportive authors, and they have through Jax Public, you have your own Pressbook account as well. So that's something I might look in the future. And Pressbooks is based on WordPress, so I may have some issues with that. I'm not sure, but we'll tackle that in the future. So a little bit, some things are easy, some things are more involved in terms of technology, for me at least.
I will jump in, just say real quick that, yeah, Pressbooks, they publish a lot of OER textbooks, but they also do publish independent publishers as well that are copyrighted works.
Okay.
I don't have a whole lot to add, but I think probably most of my experience kind of echoes Elisabeth's, actually. When I first started, I think the first book that I did in 2003 is a collection of poetry that I did through something called Ex Libris. I would not recommend. I don't know if it's even still around anymore. Maybe it is still around and much better than it was then. But when I switched from that to Create Space, which is now Kindle Direct Publishing through Amazon, it was astounding how much, it was, how simple it was, really. I mean, they take care of the things like, Library of Congress, catalog information and ISBN numbers and stuff like that. And although the covers are templates, you can mess with them so that it doesn't look like a template, or you can upload your own cover. You can do a number of things like that. And then the other thing is my website is also WordPress. I try to do a story a week. Don't always make it. It depends on how much I have to grade and everything else, how much sleep I want that week. But that has grown steadily. Its readership has grown steadily over the years. I mean, I don't get nearly as much of an audience as like a teenage girl on YouTube who talks about her shopping experiences or something, but I think that has been that's been a really good experience too, and those two sides of things have kind of fit together. And to Elisabeth's point in the cover or in the chat about the cover, I think if you upload your own cover, though, I mean, I'm not sure what the rules are then, but I assume that you still own it or can do something with it. Although Darlyn had an issue with a cover recently that you mentioned on Facebook. And I'd also be really, really interested to know what Mark's experience with all of this is, since I think by the nature of your discipline, you're probably more sophisticated with a lot of the technology than maybe some of the others of us are.
So the thing is, that's where I think my experience is, how can I put it? I think it's very Golden Corral like, where it's just a bunch of everything and you just kind of put it on your plate. Because on one end, I'm an artist and a designer before writer. So then my immediate thoughts were, okay, how is this going to graphically look? And I'm looking at all of the different, so I've used Ingram Spark before going to Amazon, mainly because I looked at Amazon and everyone told me about it. But what I started to read, and I don't know if I got a little confused on that part, but Amazon offers you an ISBN number, but then it's an ISBN number unique to them. So if you wanted something that was more accessible in like bookstores and libraries globally, you would need a different ISBN number that you can get from Boker or My Identifiers. And so I'm like, okay, now I have to learn this part. So in the midst of reading that information, the poetry was pretty ready. But then I thought, okay, well, graphically, how am I going to do this? So it worked out that I was teaching my students how to I taught them how to make a booklet while in that process learning how to make a book and an ebook. And so it just took me a couple YouTube tutorials and, well, maybe a couple, like 15 YouTube tutorials, but 15 or 20. And then once I was able to grasp it and definitely had quite the few files, book 1, then book 1A, book 1AB, book 1C, then book 2, then near final, then final, near final. Like after a good amount of those, and I kept them all to remind myself of the battle scars of that journey. It was a very interesting mix of having the cover or thinking about the graphic end and the design end, and then also the publishing part. And different websites, which I like now, they offer designers in a sense where you can pick the types of fonts you want to have, the type of layout. When I worked with Ingram Spark to physically publish my book, so I ran into an issue where when I uploaded it, I thought that, I uploaded my full design version and they had it good to go, but I uploaded it in the wrong way and I had to go about the process. But those design templates, I think they're super helpful because then for the writers who may not have that design experience, they can focus on writing and they have some really beautiful layouts. But I know with me, I'm very particular about how I want work to look. So I'm like, oh, wait, I don't like that typeface. Wait, that font, that's too large. It needs to be down like 2 pixels. So me being the design nerd that I am, I said, well, let me just go ahead and dive in and figure this stuff out. So through that, I just happen to be a very random case, again, that Golden Corral case, where it just so happened that I had enough room on my plate, for the rice, the salad, the meat, and then and then throw a roll on there and a bowl with some ice cream. Like it just happened to work with these different skills. And so did it work successfully? We'll see. But it did work. So I'm very proud of this process and to see how the merger of skills come into play. But again, anyone who's interested in self-publishing, you don't need to be a designer to create your book. Rather, if you just so happen to have design friends, hint, hint, then it's like, hey, can you take a look at this? I'll gladly feed you and trust me, artists, we love food. So if you just feed us, we'll look at stuff because we look at stuff by default internally. So then in that space, if we're fed, then we're more open to talk about like, oh, maybe you should change this font and do this color. Matter of fact, let me just do it for you. Trust me, it works. That's how I got my book cover done. I asked a friend of mine, like, hey, can you paint something for my book cover? Yeah, what do you want? You know what? Can I do this? And let's throw in this color. Do your thing, man. I'm not what? Do your thing. I sent him a little bit of money, like, thank you for your services. I appreciate it. But he enjoyed the process. So if you're able to have some creative friends on your side that are artists or designers and can give you some feedback, they can make your cover for you, or you can work together and collaborate on your cover. Collaboration. Remember that word, collaboration is super awesome. Collaborating on that cover, collaborating on the design. And from there, make your magic, do your writer magic, tell your story and get it out there. But like Darlyn said, don't be in a rush and then you have like a bunch of typos, because then the story could be good. We just got to go through like 5 to 10 pages of typos before we get to the good stuff, so it's a balance to the impatience. And I'm sure we've all been through enough to be like, okay, let's slow this down. It will get done when it's supposed to get done.
Thank you guys for sharing your experiences. And each of you have kind of started to touch on the next question, but if you have anything that you would like to add, our question was, what about the book cover? How did you find an image suitable for your work? And I think Marq has already touched on that about asking your friends and collaborating. So yeah, go ahead, Darlyn.
Can I go next? Tim sort of alluded to an event that happened, and I do want to warn everyone who's listening, because like Marq said, I collaborated with a friend on my first book cover, and it is gorgeous. I hired a hand model. The book is called Red Wax Rose, and the name of the book came from a red rose colored candle that I burned, and it was prettier after it burned than before. We hired a hand model. We put the candle in her hand. We had cookie frosting dripping out from her fingers, which we color matched, and it looks like blood. I bought smoke on the internet. Smoke. You won't believe the amount of smoke there is to choose from. We had the most beautiful smoke in the whole wide world. So go to my website, look at the cover of Red Wax Rose, and I think you'll agree it's just absolutely gorgeous. In the colors of red and black and white, which is a very punchy color combination. Gorgeous cover. And the friend who put it all together for me was a wonderful photographer who asked me one day. He said, "Hey, I want to enter a contest. Do you mind if I put the photo up there, the book cover photo?" And I said, "Oh, sure. Love you. Go ahead. Hope you win." Innocently, not understanding that what he was really doing was he was putting it on a website where it would then be up for sale to anybody in the world who wanted to buy it. Well, one day, my husband Brad was going through book cover ideas on the internet or something, and he came across this website that shows where people have stolen book covers. And there, lo and behold, was my book cover that I designed from my mind, paid my friend cash money for, and it was on the cover of a best-selling Canadian author's book. And it didn't hurt my feelings as much that she stole my cover as it did that she sold a whole lot more books than I did. That was the really hurtful part. But what I'm trying to say to you is love your friends, feed your friends, do whatever you need to do, but get them to sign something that says it's now your work. And if they come to you later and say, "Can I do something different with that?" you just say, "No, that's mine now. It's in the vault." So protect yourself.
Get them contracts, y'all. Get them contracts. That's right.
Exactly. Make sure everyone understands, that I paid you for it. It's mine now. Please don't go sell it to some Canadian lady. Okay, that's it. But it was a lot of fun making the cover. I enjoyed the process very much, and it's beautiful.
Oof, that was heavy. But that's so important though, because it does speak to there are certain people you can work with and certain people that is like, you know what? if it was something, maybe, let's do this, maybe in the next lifetime, we can totally work together, in the next couple 100 years. But yeah, I'm so glad you brought up that experience. One, I hate that you experienced that, but I'm very thankful you brought that up, Darlyn, because I think that's something that if you're new to publishing, new to writing, or really just new to sharing a project that you've spent so much time with and you really believe in, sometimes that vision can get, or your vision can get a little bit clouded because it's like, oh, I want to get it out there. I want to get it out there without covering all of the stuff that's extremely important, like making sure, okay, well, is this work that you created, now I own the rights to that, and then I can distribute it, and we have this on paper. Oh boy, I think that's some of the most valuable advice that could come from this entire experience is, even when writing an amazing story, an amazing book of poetry, an amazing novel, you will still have to make sure that the business side is covered, because yeah, we're writers, but there is a business to it, and we want to make sure that we're protected as much as possible, so I'm so glad you brought that up, and y'all just take notes on, make sure you have contracts in order, working with creatives, working with other people, even though it's a lot of reading when looking at all of these different publishers and all of these different publishing houses, read through all of it, read the fine print. If you got to put it as a PDF and zoom in, do what you need to do to read that fine print, because it'll be so much stuff that you might skip it by accident. Then it'll come back and you're thinking, well, wait, I signed up, but I don't know what happened. Oh, well, it was on page 5 in the paragraph that was really at the bottom right-hand corner that no one reads, and we strategically put it there because no one reads it. But if you would have read it, you would have known what happened. So yeah, just make sure contracts in order, the paperwork, read through all the PDFs, the links. It'll help in the long run. And hopefully that added to the conversation about the cover. I don't know, but if not, I'm going to pass it off to everyone else.
I'll just throw out there that I've actually really enjoyed working on finding what cover art I'm going to use, and I wish that I had a couple of examples to show you right now. Most of what I write about is it's creative nonfiction, but it's historical. So, I have found photographs that nobody has looked at in 80 years, so my cover for a book that I did called Goat Island Hermit, the state of Florida versus Rollins Christopher. I assumed that this person that I was writing about, that there was no photograph existed of him. And turned out that the Times-Union had photographs that they took of him in the early 1950s. And he's just super cinematic looking, so it was like, when I saw them, I was so excited that I could, and working with the Times-Union, could use them and stick one on the cover. I've also, good, a link just popped up magically. Sharon, thank you. And I've also, there's the cover for the book I did in 2013, Stalking Otis Toole, A Southern Gothic, which is Darlyn's favorite book in the world. I'm kidding. It gave her nightmares. So, but the cover for that book is actually, so I took 4 photographs of Otis Toole. If you don't know who that is, he's a pseudo serial killer from Jacksonville. And I took 4 photographs of Otis Toole, and there was a student actually at the time. The name that she goes by is Nick Duncanstein. That's not her birth name, but that's what she goes by. And she did these really colorful collages based on those 4 photographs. So the cover is actually 4 of her independent artworks. And I just, I love the cover, and it was great collaborating, with her that way. So having said that, all of the contractual stuff that Darlyn and Marq said obviously is incredibly important.
I'll just quickly comment on covers. So I'm a big fan of public domain photos. And so for my first cover, I found, let's see it, I don't know. It's not coming through at the beach. Wow. Anyway, it was a public domain photo. The second cover, the second book, I just got one from Amazon. So I just have been, I like going into, it's sort of a recent thing, but going into Digital Public Library of America and Florida Memory Project and looking for good images that are not under copyright or in public domain. And that's been kind of fun. So I may do that for the third book. So it's kind of fun to search.
Thank you. Some of you have also kind of touched on the next question about marketing, to mention how you have to market yourself when you self-publish. So how do you market your publication? And I forgot where we left off. So whoever wants to jump in on that one or start us off.
Oh, I'll start off because I don't, my answer to that is not very well. I don't market very well and I know it. So I could really stand to improve in that area. I have the typical social media accounts and try to post things on there. And I was hoping I'd get more readers through word of mouth, actually. And so it's terrible. I find it rather tedious to have to go do that part of it. And that's just, I need to improve my attitude in that regard. So that's my answer to that.
I think that's valid though, because the marketing part, that's marketing is a job, on top of everything else that you're doing with, I got to write the book, send it off to editors and compile everything. And then I want to touch on what Darlyn mentioned earlier. When you get that box of your own books, it's like, oh my God, it's real and it's here and I can hold it, and me, I'm like, oh my God, the paper, I'll smell the paper and all that stuff. But then you have to think about, well, now I have to get it to other people. And I think it brings up a very interesting dilemma that we're facing now, where I'll use social media and make graphics for it, but even just social media marketing is its own task, and it's not for the faint of heart, because you have to have your graphics and your social media engagement, and you talk with people, and you'll think of different ways of how can you connect with other people, and hopefully they retweet, reshare, all this good stuff. So, and I grew up in the age of social media where I've seen it develop, emerge, and I still can't keep up. There's so much happening, and it kind of goes back to what Tim mentioned about like an influencer who can make a video. And I'm like, dude, you got 20,000 likes. And it's just, all you did was eat a cinnamon roll. But, we spend like years on a book and we might get those 2 or 3, which we appreciate. We appreciate those 2 or 3. It's getting us closer a little bit. But I think with marketing, we're in a very interesting, well, I won't say interesting, but a peculiar dilemma now that we're all virtual, because there were ways that we could approach it. Like, for example, Jax by Jax, like having that opportunity last year was super awesome because I was able to connect with other people who were interested in the work, but now doing things virtually and, having our fair share of screen fatigue and all of these different areas, the marketing ends up being, we have to be more creative, but then also balancing, is this going to be top priority for us? Is this going to be, it's going to take the most energy that we have while we're working from home, and just taking each day by day and all that good stuff. So it's an interesting dilemma, but I think what I'm hopeful for is that in connecting with more authors and connecting with more those readers in the genres that we write in or that we write for, that hopefully adds to that word of mouth, because I think that's the most mental capacity that I have right now. Graphics, I'm like, look, I don't even feel like opening Photoshop until it's time for class. So, so my own personal stuff, I'm like, I'll get to that much later.
Yeah, I'd like to kind of riff off that a little bit. So in the first place, I should mention that Darlyn and Brad Kuhn have took over Jax by Jax and have run it. This was the third year, wasn't it, Darlyn? I think this is the third year, and I feel like they saved it. They went. It was a digital experience, but it was filmed. It was really, really professional in in a way that it really wasn't when I was trying to do it, because I don't have the same skill sets. But you really do have to find those ways to put yourself out there. So Jacksonville Public Library has its Writers Festival every year, although I'm not sure what's happening with it next year because of COVID. I mean, pandemic has thrown everything. Even those kinds of things, and working with Chamberlain Bookmine, Chamberlain's Uptown. I mean, they are super supportive of the literary community here. So is San Marco Books. So even in the process of getting in touch with book festivals and writers festivals and readings and things like that, that too can be exhausting. I mean, I've gone to book festivals that were a great experience, and I've gone to some that were a terrible experience, and I've gone to some that were just not the right fit for me. I was 30 years younger than everybody there, and everybody there had decided that they wanted to write a book as their retirement hobby, and it was all about there were like military mysteries and stuff, which is fine. Don't get me wrong. I just didn't fit in there. And yet, you do that, and you do the work of getting yourself there and setting up and everything else. And, writers, like everybody else, like all other kinds of people, can have lots of different personality traits, but a lot of us tend to be kind of introverted, and I am, and it takes a lot of energy for me to do something like that. And then at the end of the day, go, well, this wasn't a right fit. It's just, I'd also real quickly, I could go off on this for a while, which I won't, but, for sake of time and everything else. But there is a history to this, I wrote a chunk of my dissertation about Walt Whitman, who, published Leaves of Grass himself. And then he did some things we should probably avoid, like writing anonymous reviews of it himself for the New York Times, which was something you could do then that you can't do now. I've always been a huge fan of Lawrence Ferlinghetti and City Lights Books in San Francisco, which is now, a major press of alternative kinds of writing. But when it was new, it was basically one beat writer publishing himself and his friends. I mean, I don't know that they would like it to be characterized that way, but that's what it was. I mean, I don't know if Allen Ginsberg would have been published, quite frankly, the same way if City Lights didn't exist. And Ginsberg's one of the most famous poets of the 20th century. He was also really, really good at putting himself in front of the limelight and promoting himself. And so that's really a lot of times what it comes down to. And that's really, really can be really, really difficult and take a lot of energy.
I'm going to jump in. Are you done, Tim? That was really helpful information.
Hard to tell sometimes, right? Yeah, no, I'm done.
I can also jump in on people when they weren't finished. So I apologize if I did that. But, I hear over and over and over again, in our work with writers that writers are introverts and they like to be sitting at that desk and lost in that world that they're creating and listening to the characters that they've made up in their heads. And it's all wonderful. And as a writer, I understand that completely. There's nothing so engrossing as being in that world. However, I am not a writer who is an introvert. I went to a little girl's birthday party. She was turning 3 years old. And I remember the mother brought over the birthday cake, put it in front of her. There were candles. Everyone was singing. And down at the far end of the table, there was a little girl, also 3 years old. And she had her hands in the air and she was saying, "Look at me, look at me, look at me." And I was the only one who was looking at her, but I saw myself. I'm like, yeah, you're down there. And everyone's attention is on something else. And it's like, hey, I'm still here. So I say that to tell you that self-promotion is important in this business. You have to put it out there and you have to say, this is me. This is my book. It's great. I'm great. Please buy my book. And Tim has talked about the independent bookstores here in town and Jax by Jax, as Mark mentioned. Let me tell you, we can't let the pandemic let these great institutions die. Chamblin's Book Line, San Marco Books and More, they are struggling. Buy your books from there. Amazon will be fine without us, buying that book. But if you can possibly do it through an independent bookstore, please do so. Because let me tell you, the moment they can, they're going to throw open their doors and they're going to welcome the writers back. And they have your back. They're doing all this publicity for you. They've got a special book that'll make you feel like, you're Truman Capote when you walk in there and you see your books all displayed beautifully. So support them. And the other thing I want to say is you have to be like Tim and you have to be like Darlyn if you want to have a big audience of people who just grow to love you and grow to love your work. And what I'm talking about is Tim Gilmore once a week sits down and writes a beautiful story, and it's well researched and it's about something interesting. And he puts it out there week after week after week after week. He doesn't know how many people's reading it, or maybe he does. Maybe he reads the metrics. I don't do that. I don't want to know if it's 5 or 500, but he puts it out there. And I have a newsletter called Scribbles. And everybody on here who's a writer, I want you to look up Scribbles and I want you to send me information about what you're doing. Because what I do as a public service, I don't write a story a week like Tim does, but I tell the world what's going on with writers. And it's got a statewide audience. There's people all over Florida. It's not much bigger than that. I focus on Florida. But if you're a Florida writer and you've published a book or you've got a reading or, something wonderful happened, I even put when writers get an editorial in the newspaper, I put it in there. Hey, that's a publication. It's fun to open the newspaper and see your name there with your opinions. So I talk about it in Scribbles. But what happens there is that you're giving, giving, giving. And when you give, and then suddenly you've got a book to sell, or you've got a launch, or you've got something important happening, people are going to remember, she did that thing for me. And she kept Jax by Jax going when nobody could walk outside their homes and go to a reading. So I'm going to buy that book. And you don't do it for that reason. You have to do it with a pure heart, the way Tim writes those stories. But you give and you give and you give, and the karma comes back around. Having said that, if you've got a friend who's got a book, you better be out there. First of all, buy the book. Did you hear me? Buy the book. then tell everybody about the book. And you can put an honest review up. You can say, you know, Tim Gilmore said the same thing in 3 chapters in a row. I made that up, Tim. You know, but you can say something honest about the book that Tim may not enjoy reading, but I promise you he'll correct that in his next book. But we've got to support one another. And then I promise you the love will come back. People will buy your books. Put your book in the public library. I've got a whole list. Go on people's podcasts. We can't, you know, we can't travel around, but everybody's listening to podcasts because we're all stuck at home. So we're listening to podcasts. Come on my podcast. I've got a podcast. Let's do it. Florida Writers Association. They just had a big, beautiful virtual, what you call it? Their big annual conference. Sorry, the word didn't come. Conference. And they have the literary award. And, you know, I won the literary award in 2015. It was one of the greatest thrills of my life was to win that literary award. And, but they do it every year. You know, you can get involved in that. You can submit unpublished work. I've heard people say they've got friends with great books that aren't published yet. Tell them to submit it to the Florida Writers Association because those conferences have agents and publishers there. Okay? So lots of things on my list, but I'll let someone else talk now.
Thank you, everyone. So our next question moves in a slightly different direction to ask about your writing process. And you kind of each touched on that a little bit, but what methods do you use to be a productive writer? For example, some authors say you have to write for a certain amount of hours every day, or they have different processes and methodologies. Could you guys share a little bit about what you do? And I'll go ahead and let Tim start with this one.
You're muted, Tim.
Yeah. Hey. So I do think that the most important thing is making sure that you're writing. I know that sounds glib, probably, but you know, I know that people have different methods. Some people get up early. Some people stay up too late. Mine tends toward the staying up too late part. But it's really, I think, a matter of continuity, rather than thinking necessarily I'm working on this one particular thing, but you know, but instead a continuum of you know, I'm working. And that's really the most important thing. Even if what you're doing, what you're working on right at the moment, might not be your best thing. Keep working on it, and your best thing will come. You know, I really do think it's a matter of you know, there are different, I guess, cliches that people use you know, for that. I mean, some people talk about keeping the pump primed and so on. You know, but I think those things make sense. It's much harder to start something or you know, stop something than it is to keep doing something that you're doing once you get yourself into a certain kind of flow or a certain kind of zone. So if you can get yourself, if you can get yourself towards some kind of momentum, and even if it's I mean, you know, it's always interesting. There are writers who say, you know, that they make themselves work for a certain amount of time. There are writers who say they make themselves write, you know, a certain number of words. You know, I think those are helpful kind of external, artificial measures. But the main thing is that you're, I don't know if I'm saying anything. I mean, some of you might be hearing me say this and go, yeah, but you know, the main thing is that you keep writing. If you want to, it's always been interesting to me that there are, for whatever reason, there are a lot of people who want to be a writer. I don't know necessarily why. I guess there's kind of mystique or something, but there's a lot more people who want to be a writer than who actually want to write, you know? But I would just say making sure that you are continuously writing, if not every day. I mean, every day is good. That can be really hard, you know, depending on our schedules. But if you have some kind of regular routine, then I mean, I think that's the best thing a writer can do for themselves, other than reading as much as they can too.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, I'm sorry, Elisabeth. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, Mark, you go ahead. I'll go after you.
You sure? Because I'm a ramble. So, oh, okay. So I'll make sure I'm looking at time to make sure to keep it condensed. But Tim, you brought up such an excellent point where I think you brought up two really excellent points on when they want to be a writer, but then they actually have to write. And that's the part like, oh, I have to write these things down, you know, and it reminds me of a quote, or not a quote, but something that one of my students said, I think last year, and it really stuck with me. She was saying that a lot of people want to take down the giant, but they don't want to face the giant, you know, and that really, it struck me, not only because of what she said, but then also being in this artistic space of like, what do I do as an artist? Am I artist enough? But and then also reading. So one of the biggest things, in order to write better, read more, and in order to read better, write more. You know, that's one of the things that I really, really love. And read different things. You know, of course, you'll have your favorite genre, your favorite, you know, areas, or your favorite authors, but always try something different, or be open to reading something different, because it may present itself in a way that you didn't know it could be presented. So for example, if you aren't traditionally into poetry, you may come across a book that's not written in maybe full on lyric, but maybe it's more prose, and that's something that you identify with or resonate with more. But in terms of my own process, it's a bit, I don't want to say it's strange. Rather, it's just my process. And that's, I think, the biggest thing I needed to get to, is that everyone has their own individual processes, but that doesn't mean one is bad, one is good. Rather, it's who you are and what works for you. So like for me, depending on if I have like a lot of thoughts or emotions, I may write like every day, or I try and journal as frequently as possible. But in those journal entries and those thoughts, I let them kind of sit for a little bit, and then they form into whatever I want them to be at a later time. You know, but sometimes what I've learned about myself is I don't want to force anything. So I have performed some poetry for a reading at Tony Iupi's exhibition in 2018. I think it was the beginning of 2018 or 2019. And it was for an exhibition he had at Yellow House. And through that, he reached out to me, and I looked at his work, beautiful, beautiful work. But I found myself running into a space of, well, I don't know what to write just yet. So I had to go back to his show in January, and I said, Tony, let me see the show one more time. And the artwork, even though it was beautiful, it didn't spark anything for me. So I'm like, well, if I'm writing, let me look at the words and let me see if that sparks something. And he had this piece that was titled Nobody Knows My Name. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love like that in itself just really stuck with me, and the piece that it was associated with. And so from there, as soon as I had my idea, I just went, and it was done in like 20, 25 minutes. So everyone has, you have to be a little bit more, or I guess practice that self-awareness on who you are as a person and what you do, and then you learn how you make. But then also when you have that idea, it doesn't have to be perfect. Let it be organic, let it be rough, let it be messy, but try and grasp that idea and then jot it down, because we're not the ones looking for ideas. Ideas look for us. They're always looking for somebody to collaborate with. I got that from this book, Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. And the ideas, they look for the collaborators. So if they pick you, try and get that idea down, but you can finesse it over time. But that's my own process where some things work, some things don't work, but I try not to force it.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing all those insights. I'm so glad this is being recorded for people who couldn't be here today. Looking at the clock, I'm going to combine the last two questions we had on writing process. And if you could take like a minute or two to answer those, that'll give enough time for our final question, for your final thoughts, and then any questions the audience might have. So my next question combined is, what's your experience, and you've touched on this a little bit, I think each of you, but what is your experience with editing and proofreading your self-published work? How do you go about it, and how do you get honest feedback on your writing before you go to publish?
Okay, I'll start with that one. I write and then edit fairly laboriously. So I'm sort of a slow turtle working through chapter by chapter when I'm doing these novels. So I edit as I go, and then I reread the chapter after I've written it and edit again. And then about halfway through a novel, I find I've forgotten what I said. I've forgotten probably some key pieces of things I've said. And so I reread from the beginning and edit then. And so I'm constantly editing and proofreading. And that seems to work for me in this sort of slow, I'm not a very fast writer at all. And then how do I get honest feedback? That is a real challenge. And I think I prepare a manuscript for first readers, and they tend to be friends. And that's probably not the most honest feedback. So I need to find some enemies to read my work. Because then they give me more. I don't know. I'm just joking, but I've heard that, you should get an impartial person to read your work, and I'm sort of looking for that. So that's just my quick answer to those two questions.
I guess it's my turn. I'm going to speak specifically to people who are interested in writing for NaNoWriMo, okay? And in this month, I don't want you to do what Elisabeth just said. Her advice is wonderful for people who write regularly. You already have a routine. It is always good to go back and carefully look at your work. For NaNoWriMo, your mission is to get words down out of your head and heart and onto the page or onto the screen, as many as you can do in this month. And my suggestion is get up early. If you wake up routinely at 6 o'clock in the morning, tomorrow set your alarm for 4 o'clock. You are allowed to get up, go to the potty, and then walk directly to your computer. The reason is when you're in the middle of the flow, one of my professors used to call it riding the thermal. When you are riding the thermal, your brain, no matter what else you're doing, part of your brain is working on that book. And especially you work on that book while you sleep. So you have gone through your busy day. Tim, you've taught a class. You've had dinner with your beautiful wife. You've watched a little election coverage and decided not to hang yourself. And you go to sleep. While you're asleep, your book is fresh on your mind, and your little gnomes in there are opening and closing file drawers and rearranging and coming up with that beautiful fresh idea that Mark's talking about. And when you wake up in the morning, you're ready to go. You are at your most creative. No one is saying, Mommy, feed me breakfast. No one is saying, hey, you, get into the office. No one is saying, did you grade all those papers? You just have blessed silence for an hour or two, and it's your time. It's hard at first. If you're used to waking up at 6 and now you're waking up at 4, it's hard. But you will be so excited about your project that you will get up, you'll get in there and you'll go. And I want you to remember what Anne Lamott said in Bird by Bird. Everyone's entitled to a crappy first draft. If you look up the quote, that's not what she said, but everyone's entitled to a crappy first draft. So in NaNoWriMo, you just go. You don't go back and read one page. You just go. You have a goal, 50,000 words at the end of this month, and you just go. December and January and February are for rereading it slowly and doing that beautiful process that Elisabeth is talking about and going, oh gosh, I called him Johnny Alder in the first chapter and now he's Frank and I got to fix that and da-da-da. And then, yes, have people read. And Elisabeth, I'm looking right at you. If you don't have a writing group, start one, because they are, other writers are your most valuable resource. Other writers know the rules. I had one called The Pregnant Pigs that was like, we were going for over a decade. And none of my work would exist without The Pregnant Pigs. So, yeah, that's it.
Thank you, Darlyn. Mark or Tim, do you have any other thoughts to add?
No, I can't follow that up.
Okay. Moving on then to the last question. Sorry, Amber, do you want me? I can just go ahead and ask since I'm unmuted. So final question. What advice would you give to others setting out on the self-publishing journey? Any final thoughts? So basically, this is the final thoughts question. Anything else you want to share?
Yeah. Just do it. Like, don't, and this isn't to say, don't be concerned about, the nuances, but just do it. That's truly the best advice I can give you. And that's building off of what Darlyn mentioned, where it's like, go write. You have time to edit, but you need to, if you don't have anything to edit, you can't edit, so, and that's something I had to tell myself getting back into visual art and drawing. I was stuck in analysis paralysis. Well, my work doesn't look like it did before, or I don't know if it's going to be like this artist, or it may not turn out, or this idea. I spent so much time thinking and wasted days not doing. So then one day I said, let me just draw. And through that, and the same thing happens with writing. Let me just write because, I don't have the motivation. Motivation comes after action. So if you do it enough, then you'll get to the place of, I'm motivated. Oh, wait, I could do this. Oh, this would be an interesting idea. What if I try this out? So just go out there and do it. That's my advice.
And I would say, do what you're good at and hire other people to do what you're not good at. And the very last step is get that thing professionally edited. Get it professionally edited. Absolutely.
I would add just, make it your best effort and don't be afraid to start and to do it. I mean, that's one thing that I was proud that I wanted to write a novel. And, I have one or two sitting in a drawer somewhere, but these are ones that I actually went the distance with, and I'm very proud of that. And know that the librarians, I know at FSCJ and Jack's Public Library are on your side. The library staff is very pro writing, pro self-publishing. And this is something that has, I think, changed over the past 10 years or so since I was working in libraries before. I mean, the whole landscape has changed. And so there are people out there that are that want your work. And I think I put it in the chat, but Jack's Public Library, there's the Indie Author Project they partner with. And when you submit a book for their contest, or you can just submit a book to them, they'll put the ebook up via BiblioBoard through Jack's Public Library. So it's actually out there. So libraries are on your side. Bookstore, like we're talking about independent bookstores, they're on your side. So take heart and just take the first step and start writing.
Well, thank you so much to all of our FSCJ authors. And in our final few moments, I just wanted to see Does the audience have any questions for our authors? You can go ahead and type it into the chat and we'll field those questions appropriately.
While we're waiting, I had a question about going back originally to the first question about indie and self and traditional publishing. Do you have to have an agent for indie or traditional publishing?
Well, so traditional, I guess, if you are talking about, you know,
like the New York publishing houses that like Darlyn was talking about earlier.
Then for the most part, yes. I mean, and again, as Darlyn pointed out, you know, it can be a matter of, you know, taking however much time to find that agent and then taking the time for that agent to connect you. That's the traditional means. Independent publishing with smaller presses and imprints. I mean, they, you know, often, usually, or I don't know why else they would do it, like to have real relationships, you know, with the artists that they work with. So that's a much more personal, direct kind of connection. There's a couple of questions in the chat. Jeff Hess asks if we have any tips for writer's block.
Yes. I'm sorry, Tim.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I think one of the things that I do for myself, and I recommend to anybody, is you have to live a little bit. So, you know, if you are stuck writing and you don't have any ideas, step away from it and go live. You know, because we're constantly absorbing information, constantly absorbing ideas and content. And sometimes you do need to step away and process that, whether it be, you know, you do something different, which can then inspire what you write about, because now you're keeping yourself active and stimulated doing something else, which may spark an idea that goes right back to the book. So the biggest thing that any creative can do, any writer, any person who needs to or wants to share that story, you have to live a story and then you'll be able to write about it. So that's something I would recommend, is just step away, breathe, take time away and come back to it and then just do it. Let it write and say, you know what? This isn't going to make sense. Great. Or maybe I'll just write a word on a sheet of paper. All good. Everything will work how it's supposed to. And even though it's hard, it's easier said than done, trust the process. Trust the process.
A lot of times, writer's block has another name, and it's called perfectionism. If you do not give yourself permission to write that crappy first draft, you're going to run into it being hard, and you're going to stop. You're going to say, I'm blocked. You know what you type when you think you're blocked? You type, gee, I think I'm blocked. I wonder why I'm blocked. What's going on in my life that has me blocked? Who am I afraid will read this and, you know, think it's bad? And just go with that. And I would say, fire the judge and jury. And if you're the worst judge and jury, fire yourself. You know, write as if no one in the whole wide world will ever see that piece that you're working on. Just write the words that come into your brain and flow through your fingertips onto the keyboard or the pencil, and no one's ever got to read it, you know? But in there, like a sculptor starts with this big old blob of clay or marble, and he chips away until he finds, you know, Venus de Milo. That's what you do. You just write English words until Venus appears. And the way you get to her is you edit out all the crap. So allow yourself to write crap.
Thank you guys for your insights. We also had another question in the chat. Do you have anyone you follow on social media that helps inspire you to write or keep going on when you hit the wall? And Elisabeth said, She likes listening to interviews with the writer Lori Moore. Does anyone else have any great people to follow to inspire you? Any advice? You can put that in the chat. And I also wanted to take this moment for you guys to fill out the survey as well that Susan put in the chat. That really helps us plan our events, and we appreciate your feedback. I'm not seeing any other questions in the chat, so I'm going to turn it over to you, Sharon.
Okay. So did anybody, sorry, I got lost for a moment. Did anybody want to answer that question about anyone you follow on social media? No?
I'm sorry. I was just typing it into the chat, but
Oh, you muted yourself.
did I mention technology is not my first gift? Sorry. Lynn Scaphiak Harlan is a writer and poet and legend in Jacksonville. And she has a group called the Shanty Boat Writers Group that you can follow on, I believe it's on Facebook. And if you go back and watch Jax by Jax Literary Arts Festival, I think her, she did a workshop for us on hooks, how to hook a reader. And you can look her up there, but she does a fantastic job of helping people with their books. So after you write all month, you get up 2 hours early and you give yourself permission for it not to be good. If you take that stuff to Lynn, she'll help you make it better.
Thank you. And if any of the panelists have other people or sources that you frequently use or recommend for, like, if people in the audience are interested in like hiring editors or finding writing groups, if you want to post those links in the chat box, that would be great too. Thank you so much for joining us today, and a huge thank you to our esteemed panelists. We sincerely appreciate the time and expertise that you've shared with us today. Again, links to the panelists' websites are in the chat box, and the link to our FSCJ author LibGuide is there as well. If there are no final thoughts, we hope you enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you. Y'all have a good day. Stay healthy, hydrated, and hygienic in these streets, y'all. Just like I tell my students, follow 3 H's.